Computers in the 1980s, created by T.J. Elschlager. But first, some background information on the 1980s. Star Wars: Return of the Jedi was released in 1983 and became a hit after the first day. Also in 1983, the McChicken Nugget was introduced by McDonald's. Then in 1982, Michael Jackson came out with one of his most popular albums to date, Thriller. Then finally in 1980, Ronald Reagan became the 40th President of the United States. Post-it notes were created, MTV launched their TV station, and finally the Rubik's Cube hit the shelves of toy stores everywhere. Back in the 1980s, there were some awesome computer advancements that took place, one of which was the release of Apple's personal computer Lisa. It was introduced as one of the first graphical user interfaces, or GUI. Lisa ran on a Motorola 68000 microprocessor and came equipped with 1 megabyte of RAM, a 12-inch black and white monitor, dual 5¼ inch floppy disk drives, and a 5 megabyte profile hard drive. After Lisa, Nintendo released the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, when it was released in North America. The NES started to reverse the fortunes of the American gaming industry. This system launched with 18 available titles. Now, IBM's PC, formerly known as IBM Model 5150, the IBM PC revolutionized business computing by becoming the first PC to gain widespread adoption by industry. Finally, the Commodore 64, or C64, as it is more known as, sold for $595, comes with 64 kilobytes of RAM, and features impressive graphics. Thousands of software titles were released over the lifespan of C64, and by the time it was discontinued in 1993, it had sold more than 22 million units. Richard Stallman, a programmer at MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab, set out to develop a free alternative to the popular Unix operating system. Another person of interest is Fujio Masuoka, who invented flash memory in 1984. While working for Toshiba, capable of being erased and reprogrammed multiple times, flash memory quickly gained a loyal following in the computer memory industry. Although Perl, practical extraction and report language, is written by Larry Wall. It was intended to facilitate report processing and could scan and extract information from text files and ultimately create reports generated from that information. It was designed for ease and use and quick programming. In 1981, Sony introduced the first 3.5-inch floppy drive and diskettes. The first significant company to adopt the 3.5-inch floppy for general was HP in 1982. Available to hold 550 megabytes of pre-recorded data, CD-ROMs grow out of music compact disc, or CDs. The CD was developed by Sony and Philips in 1982 for distributing music only. In the early 1980s, a new product called the Bernoulli box would offer the convenience of removable cartridges like Winchester drives, but in a much smaller, more portable format. Bernoulli cartridges worked on the same principle as floppies, but were larger and in a much more shielded enclosure. Stored 10 or 20 megabytes instead of simply the 1.44 megabyte limit on a floppy disk. Another example would be the compact tape. Originally developed by Digital Equipment Corporation for its VAX family of computers, the drive wrote 22 data tracks back and forth on a half-inch wide tape and originally held 92 megabytes of data. It replaced the 1960s era DEC tape. Announced in March 1984, IBM's new 3480 cartridge tape system sought to replace the traditional reels of magnetic tape in the computer center with a 4 by 5-inch cartridge. Some computer processing units in the 1980s consisted of the following. The Connor CP340A hard disk drive was introduced. It established a 3.5-inch hard disk drive form factor as a standard of the time. The CP340A was controlled by a microprocessor, used embedded servo positioning, and had self-testing functionality. The HSC-50 contains local intelligence capable of managing the physical activity of the drives, optimizing system throughput, detecting and correcting physical errors, and performing local functions such as diagnostic execution. The final example would be when Seagate Technology creates the first hard disk drive for microcomputers, which was known as the ST506. Many people ask, how did computers look back in the 1980s? Well, compared to computers in the 21st century, they weren't super attractive. They were very large, very boxy looking, and they were simply heavy and bulky, especially the laptops. But back in the 1980s, they appeared extremely high quality. Alright, some cool tech stuff that we got out of the 1980s. One of those was the CD player. Specifically, the Philips CD100 was released in August of 1982. It allowed those who listened to music on their CDs to play them for friends and family. They were small and portable for the time period, and they were also very popular with many teens. Alright, the second thing would be the video cassette recorder, or VCR. It was available and usable in the 1970s, but it was only in the 1980s when cheap microprocessors and low-cost manufacturing impacted their cost that VCRs became cheap enough for consumers to easily afford. Alright, the third thing would be the mobile phone. In the 1980s, communication was different. Businesses and consumers were desperate for something that could make communication easier. Lo and behold, Motorola launched the DynaTAC 8000X in 1983. It proudly offered you about 1 hour of talk time, used an LED display, and had extremely attractive aerial antenna. Finally, tech was simply different in the 1980s. Music had to be downloaded onto CDs. 3.5-inch floppy disks were used for storage. The first mobile phone was simply cool. Computers were ugly yet somewhat practical. The Seagate ST506 hard disk drive was a common processing unit. The compact tape was a common storage device. And Fujio Masuoka was very important to this age because he created the first flash memory.